Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast. I'm Dr. Supatra Tovar, and I am so excited to have neuropsychological expert and president of the Los Angeles County Psychological Association, Dr. Cris Scaglione, with us today. Dr. Cris, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am very excited to pick her brain about all things neuropsychology and all things LACBA, but I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. Cris first, and then I'll get right into the questions. Dr. Cris Scaglione is a clinical psychologist with a PhD from Fielding Graduate University. With a career spanning since 1985, she has extensive experience in therapy, cognitive rehabilitation, and neuropsychology, assisting clients dealing with trauma, loss, neurodiversity, and chronic illness or injury. Dr. Scaglione adopts a practical and varied approach, integrating biopsychosocial perspectives with depth, humanistic, trauma-informed, and mindfulness methodologies, while emphasizing self-care and focusing on clients' strengths and resources. Her background in anthropology and personal experiences contribute to her sensitivity toward issues of identity and culture. Dr. Scaglione serves as the president of the Los Angeles County Psychological Association, where she is committed to promoting diversity and inclusion within the psychological community. Dr. Cris, welcome.
Thank you.
So, I really want to know about your history. What led you into the field of psychology, and what inspired you to specialize in neuropsychology?
Oh, I actually started out in anthropology, as you mentioned, because I'm just very interested in people. They're fun, they're interesting, they're weird. And I've always been interested in brain evolution, because that's what makes us most different from the other creatures on the planet. And there was, I've had a concussion as a child that wasn't actually a concussion. It turns out to be a moderate brain injury. It still affects me today. Wow. And there's other neurological issues in the family that I knew were pretty profoundly influential on the person and also the family members. I think one of the fun things about going into neuropsych, though, was that I also grew up with family friends that had really pretty severe neurological impairment and should have died really young, but they didn't. They're still alive in their 90s. Wow. And they do so, I'm pretty convinced, because they're happy. They seek out joy. And it takes just very little, mind you, but they're fun, happy, lovely people to be around, and they've outlived everybody's expectations for what should have happened to them. So those were all very heartfelt and interesting things to me, and I thought it would be interesting to pursue a career in that field.
I love that. Give us a picture of neuropsychology as a specialty. Okay. How is that different from, say, someone who's just treating depression or something like that? Mm-hmm.
Well, we treat plenty of depression as well, but neuropsych now is a little different than it was when I came up. You could be a regular clinical psychologist and simply say on your work sites, send anybody to me that looks like they have any kind of brain history, concussion, dementia, that sort of thing. And you learned that way. You took specialized courses as well. And you also sought out specialized training, say in assessment, that sort of thing. Now you have to have more specialized training and more specialized supervision. But generally you end up doing essentially clinical psychology with a lot of assessment, and that's where it ends for a lot of people. But a lot of us also really enjoy doing therapy with individuals, families, couples, having them adjust to what has happened to them, or what they were born with and have to deal with that's different than the rest of us have to contend with. And I also like doing cognitive rehab, which is essentially helping people build on the skills that they have in order to keep themselves organized, on point, happy, as functional as possible. So I think a lot of people think that neuropsych is just assessment. It's a great deal more than that. It's the application of that knowledge to help people live a meaningful life. That's how I see it anyway.
I love that. And I think a lot of people don't really fully understand what neuropsych assessment really is. So if you could explain to our audience who may not have any experience at all in assessment, what exactly is it and what do you use it for?
Okay. Excuse me. Sometimes an assessment will be very pointed. Somebody who is interested in whether or not their kid has ADHD. So it's going to be a fairly, it's a smaller, less involved process of assessment, testing, etc. But I'll start with a broader picture. If you have a stroke, for instance, or a brain injury, or you're not sure exactly what's going on after the car accident, we get a history, we get personality testing, and we do then specialized tests of your thinking processes. We try to do a pretty good survey of attention, memory, perceptual skills, motor skills. We do almost like a substitute brain scan in the sense that we do testing of the front of your head, the back of your head on both sides. So we get a pretty good overall global picture of at least what we can of your cognitive skills. We do the same kind of thing, but at perhaps a slightly more focused way for somebody interested in whether or not they might have a learning disability or ADHD. There's certain tests that you, over time, must have in a battery. That's changed a bit over time. Right now, I'll have a lot of people also that I see that are younger adults, and they're on the autism spectrum, but they were not aware of it. During their intake interview, they're coming in for, say, the things that regular people would come in for therapy normally, and that would be anxiety and depression. But it's very clear during the interview that they have a great deal of neurodiversity going on, and that's been the source of a great deal of their strain. So I do a lot of adult screenings now for autism, and that's been a lot of fun.
Oh, I can only imagine. I actually have quite a few adults on the spectrum in my practice, and I just find that population just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, they're refreshing. You can be really, really direct.
Yes.
You don't have to be metaphoric and poetic.
Yes.
It's great.
I love that. Yeah. Well, what are some of the limitations of assessment, especially for more marginalized groups, women, people of color?
Right. I would include in that also older adults. So some of the limitations are that there is so much variability that we don't really account for. We're always looking towards some kind of middle-of-the-road norm and comparing people to that. But that norm itself has its own biases. It is usually geared toward Anglo-European, middle-class, educated, very much the kind of client, actually, that most clinicians see. So we're leaving out immigrants, people that speak more than one language, older adults that may have a very broad and deep experience that's not accounted for necessarily in their cognitive strengths and weaknesses. The norms that we use are often, again, really strongly biased towards a more familiar, for lack of better terminology, sort of the Midwestern population.
Right.
So you can actually make a living testifying for minoritized members of our culture, showing that the test that they just took was not accurately representative of their functioning. but that takes a lot of finesse and some courage, because you're swimming upstream all the time.
Right. How do you deal with that in your practice? Say that you are testing somebody from a more marginalized background. How do you account for that in your testing measures?
Fortunately, I'm not doing a lot of that anymore, but you have to be pretty brave. You have to be very knowledgeable. You also have to rely on things like getting a really, really good history and understanding that, this person before their car accident had tremendous skills in some maybe untestable area, like architecture, like mechanics, like writing music. We don't test for those things.
Right.
Yet after an injury, say, or a stroke, they are no longer able to do that, or not able to do it in the same way. So a lot of it becomes narrative process, advocacy, essentially, and then trying your very best to also maybe tap into that in some way with some test that might not be readily available or easily understood. So quite a bit of it is in the storytelling part of a report.
Yes.
And also helping the person understand that although this might not be seen in other settings, you see it and you get it and you help them essentially adjust to that.
Yes, which is why I think the clinician is so important in the testing process. It's not just about the numbers. It's not just about the stats.
Right.
It's about taking into account what you might get as a result and interpreting the result from the lens of the client.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I think people can be stigmatized.
Oh, all the time. Yeah. I'm somewhat unusual, at least from what I've seen of the recent reports I've seen, for instance. Perhaps because I'm older and for whatever reasons, maybe familiarity with a lot of people with neurodiversity. I'm not. The numbers are important. It's important to know where the norms are, or taken from, though, and you also need to know when it's okay to not administer the test the way the textbook tells you to, or the manual tells you to administer the test. For me, an assessment is about helping the person provide their absolute best performance to see where their upper limits are, essentially, as opposed to trying to compare them to some inappropriate, perhaps, norms. And so I got into trouble for that during doing med-legal assessments, actually, because they really are very much more rigid around that. And I'm finding that most of the reports that I see now are from that really rigid school of thought that says, no, this is how the manual says you got to do it.
Yes.
This is what the stats say. This is what the norms say. But that does not represent the person.
Yes.
That often does them a disservice.
Yes.
And that's with, again, not even non-minority clients. It's for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think that that's an important area that needs to maybe have a closer look, and maybe even a redesign of certain tests. Yeah. Although the tests out there are pretty amazing.
They really are, right. And I think we're sort of dazzled by that sometimes. They are pretty amazing. But I think there's a little bit of scientism in that, that just because you can do this thing and you can get a number that supposedly means something, that doesn't mean that's actually what it means for that person.
Right. But it is super helpful for people who are looking for accommodations, especially in school. I always recommend, if any of my kid clients are struggling, that they get assessed.
Absolutely.
Because the accommodations can make all the difference. And it's really important for people to know that not all brains are created equally.
Right.
And sometimes kids just need a little extra time. And that extra time can actually level the playing field.
Oh, easily, yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Well, more about neuropsychology. How does it aid individuals in their healing journey, especially with people who are dealing with trauma or neurodiversity?
Well, you've touched on some of that. that the world itself, to some degree, can accommodate the person.
Yeah.
More importantly, though, I think it's about being in touch with yourself, being in touch with what made things so difficult for you at times, and being able to understand that in a different way, and also to be able to have some agency in changing that, changing how you feel about it, changing how you see it, changing how you manage it in the world. That's incredibly healing, and it takes a couple of years, actually, usually, for that adjustment to be comfortable and consistent and sustainable. I think that eventually it also helps the person be an advocate for others as well, and help other people understand how to function, how to be in the world, understand that, as you had said, not all brains are created equal, and they don't have to be. That's the really important part. In fact, they shouldn't be. So. Yes,
definitely. What are the latest advancements in neuropsychology that we might not know?
I think fundamentally the principles are the same. I think what's different now is we have some slightly better attunement towards things like adult autism, ADHD. We have also a lot more ways of testing people virtually, or at least electronically. We can sit in the same room and you have an iPad and I have an iPad that are connected, and so there's fewer mistakes in scoring, for instance, and it's much easier to get the testing results more quickly and more accurately. I think we may be moving towards also having some, say, neurofeedback as an assessment rather than a treatment tool, but I think that's a ways off.
How so?
I think that neurofeedback is developing a nice database of what it looks like to have, say, a brain injury or certain types of inattention, or what neurodiverse brains look like metabolically. And that might be a good way to, like getting a nice baseline EEG reading, or would be, I think, a very useful way of assessing people.
Okay, give our listeners who may not understand that terminology what exactly neurofeedback is.
I'm not an expert in it. I've actually had it done a few times and really enjoyed it. It's a complicated EEG that takes a look at brain activity throughout the entire brain. We now have a good idea as to what. I'm trying not to get into things like frequencies and all that sort of thing, but the certain speeds and certain intensities of activity throughout the brain is what this EEG will measure. We expect certain areas of the brain to be at rest, more active, and certain areas to be less active. We expect certain parts of the brain to be connected in a certain way, but not hyper-connected, not overly connected, and not overly active. So they have some nice baseline norms, essentially, of what a brain at rest should look like. There's some good data that they also have as to what a brain that is trying to pay attention should look like, and what parts of the brain should be active and interacting, or other parts of the brain should be perhaps a little more restful at those periods. We have an idea that a brain that is not anxious or that is not depressed, what that looks like, versus a brain that is anxious or is depressed. So I think that may end up becoming a possible way of at least having a snapshot of someone's neurological functioning.
So interesting. And normally neurofeedback's been used in order to help the person learn how to control their bodily systems to reduce stress.
Right. It started out very much like biofeedback is.
Yeah.
And we still don't know how that works. It's like magic. Really, somebody gives you a sound that is correlated with your heart rate or your in the case of neurofeedback, a certain brain frequency in a certain part of your brain. Yet, given that little bit of feedback, there's so much of our unconscious or automatic processing in the brain that uses that information in a way to eventually control it. And you can do it eventually without the feedback. There's a feeling you get. It's really kind of cool.
Yes, it is really cool. I actually did biofeedback in one of my practicums on clients. I did it on my, had somebody administer it to me, and we were always playing around with it too as practicum students. And it's fascinating. Yeah. Really, actually, I think helps people gain agency and control, especially if they have things like, stressful panic attacks.
Right.
Anxiety attacks, gives them like a tangible tool that they can take with them in order to manage that. Mm-hmm. So it's very cool that they're actually thinking of bridging that more into assessment. Mm-hmm. I love that.
I'm not certain that there's anybody that's actively doing that, but my guess is that's what's coming next.
Oh, I hope so. So now a big part of you in LACPA, and we're going to get more into that for your presidency in the next section of this episode. But give me a picture of why cultural sensitivity and understanding of identity is so important in therapeutic outcomes and to the work that you're doing at LACPA.
I don't know how it's going to necessarily affect LACPA. I just got here. But unfortunately, and this kind of gets to something that we might want to discuss later, the entire culture, I'm not from this culture, by the way. I'm from a slightly different culture. I'm Canadian. And I used to jokingly say, if we ever go to war with Canada... So, yeah, I may be heading back home soon. Anyway... There are slight differences between American and Canadian culture, and one of them is that Canadian culture tends to be less expectant that everybody's going to blend in, and this is a melting pot. Mm-hmm. It's more about, hey, welcome, and there's a tendency for, as there is in many cities in the States as well, neighborhoods where people tend to settle. So I grew up where there's a bunch of Italians here and a bunch of Russians over there and a bunch of Polish people over there. And we all enjoyed each other and also celebrated holidays, etc. Mm-hmm. That was fun. My experience here has been that the expectation of assimilation is very, very powerful. The expectation of masculinity as this lone gunman as an archetype is very foreign and frightening in many ways. And I've seen this. I came here in the 70s, so I was in high school, and I've seen over time that rather than becoming more tolerant and more accepting, the country seems to have become increasingly divided. There's been an increasing gap in wealth. There's been an increasing gap in understanding disability and understanding old age and understanding people from different cultures, being tolerant of the reasons why immigrants come here for a better life. Without that, we are in grave danger of just something perhaps as powerful as civil war. Short of that, within the field of psychology, when we do not understand that the people coming to see us have a different history, have different values, may use language differently, have different expectations of what connection is and what candidness is and what emotional expressivity is, we do not meet them where they are. We cannot treat them well. And when they feel that difference, particularly since they're feeling that difference in the world every minute of every day outside of the therapy room, it causes them additional harm. Yeah. It makes them feel as though they're still being oppressed. And at the very least, we're not going to get them come back if we even get them in the door. Mm-hmm. So that's just offhand what comes to mind when you ask that. Yes,
and I think where we need to take psychology I think, and that's what we're going to talk about with the future of LACPA in the second half of this episode. But we're out of time for this half, but I am super grateful to have Dr. Cris Scaglione here with me, and really hope you tune in for the next half of this interview, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember, the content shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight Podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.